WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Banjul, 7 p.m. in Lagos, Nigeria. Good evening and welcome to NEWSLINK, live on West Africa, Democracy Radio 94.9 FM, and around the world at WADR.org. Here are the top stories. Majority bloc in Sierra Leone's parliament approves constitutional amendment despite opposition by minority APC camp. Senegal's anti-graft agency publishes report on compliance rate of asset declaration by senior state officials. Malian prosecutors request a 10 years prison sentence for activist Rasbath and Rokia Dumbuya as their trial resumes in Bamako. And in Ghana, legal practitioners call for a closer examination of Aska Powell agreement involving former power minister.
If ASA is doing 11 cents per kilowatt hour and others are doing about 20 cents per kilowatt hour, it tells you how much some dealers might have gone through for us to have these higher power purchase costs.
Please stay with us for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Augustine Bill Coley.
Thank you for joining our broadcast. Sierra Leone's parliament has approved sweeping constitutional changes that could reshape the country's electoral system ahead of the 2028 presidential election. The reforms, backed by the ruling Sierra Leone People's Party, were passed by a simple majority of lawmakers present, according to Speaker Sikbol Solomon Tamans. But as Christopher Aticho reports, the vote yesterday, Monday, was overshadowed by opposition resistance.
Lawmakers from the main opposition All People's Congress walked out, insisting the reforms required a two-thirds majority to pass. Among the biggest changes is a proposal to scrap the current 55% presidential threshold and replace it with a simple nationwide majority. However, candidates would still need to secure at least 20% of the vote in two-thirds of the country's districts to avoid a rerun. But the APC strongly disagrees, arguing that the existing 55% threshold forces presidential candidates to build wider nationwide support and gives the eventual winner greater legitimacy. For its part, the ruling SLPP parliamentary bloc insists the changes will strengthen democracy, calm tension, and security risks associated with presidential runoffs. The reforms would also introduce proportional representation for parliamentary elections and reserve at least 30% of political leadership positions for women. The proposed law further requires the president to consider regional balance, gender equality, and minority inclusion when making appointments. With the opposition challenging the process, the constitutional changes are likely to remain a major political flashpoint as Sierra Leone moves towards its next presidential election in 2028.
Christopher Aticho with that report. In Senegal, the National Office for the Fight Against Corruption, known as OFNAC, has published lists of public officials who have complied or failed to comply with the country's asset declaration requirements. The lists cover several key institutions of the government. These include the Presidency, the National Assembly, the Ministry of the Armed Forces, the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and the Justice Sector. Details with Francis Boniface.
The National Office for the Fight Against Corruption, OFNAC, reveals that at the Ministry of Armed Forces, more than 150 officials are listed as having submitted their declarations, while nearly 145 others are identified as being in default. At the Presidency, around 100 officials and staff members have regularized their situation, while a separate list names those who have yet to comply. The Ministry of Economy and Finance also records several hundred declarations, but more than 230 officials are listed as non-compliant. The affected institutions include the State Judicial Agency, the National Agency for Statistics and Demography, and CENTIF, the Financial Intelligence Unit. In the justice sector, nearly 120 judges, administrators, and court clerks have filed their declarations, while more than 50 others remain in default. OFNAC says the publication of this list is part of its mandate to monitor asset declarations, promote transparency, and help prevent illicit enrichment. The authorities may now take action against officials who have failed to meet their legal obligations.
Francis Boniface reporting there. Mali's transitional president, General Assimi Goïta, has received the final report of the National Justice Forum 9 months after 218 recommendations were adopted to reform the country's justice system. The recommendations covered areas including the training and recruitment of justice professionals, the evaluation of magistrates, the digitization of judicial procedures, internal oversight, and prison conditions. They are now expected to be incorporated into the 10-year Justice Sector Development Program from 2026 to 2035. Imo Edit has the details.
The report was presented to him on Monday by the Minister of Justice and Human Rights, Mamadou Kasuge. The recommendations include measures to improve the training and recruitment of justice professionals, strengthen the evaluation of magistrates, digitize judicial procedures and criminal records, reinforce internal oversight, and improve conditions in prisons. But the implementation of the recommendations comes as access to justice remains a concern for many Malians. An Afrobarometer survey published in February 2026 found that 56% of respondents doubted that ordinary citizens could obtain justice in the courts. Only 45% believe that a case could have a fair outcome. The survey, nevertheless, recorded some improvement in confidence in the judiciary. 52% of respondents said they trusted the courts, an increase of 17% point since 2020. However, perceptions of unequal treatment remain significant. 57% of those surveyed said citizens are frequently treated differently before the law, while many respondents also believed that the influence of powerful individuals can affect judicial decisions. For millions of Malians who depend on the justice system, confidence will ultimately be determined not by the number of recommendations adopted, but by how effectively they are implemented in the courts and prisons.
Imo Edit with those details. Still in Mali, the trial of Mohamed Yusuf Batali, also known as Rasbath, and Rokia Doumbouya, popularly known as Rose V. Cherry, continued today before the criminal chamber of the Bamako Court of Appeal. At the end of the proceedings, the prosecution requested a 10-year prison sentence for the well-known commentator, along with a fine of 240,000 CFA francs. The prosecution also requested 10 years in prison with 5 years suspended for Rose V. Cherry. She was also ordered to pay a fine of 240,000 CFA francs. Following the prosecution's submissions, the hearing was suspended before resuming with closing arguments from the defense. Rasbath and Rose V. Cherry are being prosecuted for criminal association and undermining the credibility of the state. The two defendants had criticized rising food prices during a broadcast. During questioning, both Rasbath and Rose denied the allegations against them. For the hearings is scheduled for August 17.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. NEWSLINK continues.
Now let's take you to Ghana, where the conviction of former Goldman Sachs banker Kweku Asante Beko in a U.S. bribery case has reopened questions about Ghana's power purchasing agreements and the cost of deals entered into during the country's power crisis. Experts in energy and legal practitioners are now calling for a closer examination of the AXA agreement and possible action against any Ghanaian officials found to have played a role in the alleged bribery scam. Cliplin Amuku from Accra completes the story.
The $1 million bribery case has put Ghana's energy contracting process under fresh scrutiny, with concerns extending beyond the conviction handed down in the United States. Energy analyst Benjamin Nsia says the government must revisit some existing power purchase agreements to determine whether they continue to serve the public interest given the financial burden of excess capacity and power sector debts.
If AXA is doing 11 cents per kilowatt hour and others are doing about 20 cents per kilowatt hour, it tells you how much some dealers might have gone through for us to have these higher power purchase costs.
But the issue is not only about the cost of the power deal. Private legal practitioners believe the U.S. conviction should trigger investigations in Ghana to establish whether officials who allegedly benefited from the scheme can be identified and prosecuted.
This one is a Ghana matter. It's not partisan in that case because back home, all these players seem to be on different sides. There's a mix there.
Once there is evidence, enough evidence following an investigation, it is in the public interest to prosecute such crime.
I strongly recommend the Attorney General's office liaise, in addition to talking to the U.S. authorities, talk to the OSP here because the OSP did all the groundwork, the U.S. authorities.
The renewed scrutiny is now putting pressure on the government to explain the circumstances surrounding the AXA deal, establish whether any Ghanaian officials were involved, and determine if the agreement still represents value for money for the state. For WADR, Elik Limauku, Accra.
Crossing over to the Gambia, the selection of Kanafi male Talib Ahmed Bensouda as the flag bearer of the Coalition 2026 is generating discussion among Gambians just as political parties prepare for the December presidential election. Bensouda emerged as the coalition's candidate on August 8 following a closely watched and at times turbulent selection process that saw some contenders withdraw. With the coalition now having its flag bearer, what do ordinary Gambians make of Bensouda's election? And do they believe it puts a fight in the 2026 election? WADR's Rosa Marakates in Banjul reports.
For some Gambians, Bensouda's emergence represents a new chapter of opportunity. As mayor of Kanifing, he has built a public profile around local government and development, and his supporters point to his experience in managing the country's most populous municipality. Here are opinions of some Gambians who believe Bensouda is the right person to lead the coalition.
As mayor, he has been able to connect with young people and ordinary Gambians, and that gives him some understanding of the challenges people face.
Bensouda matches what many young Gambians want: new faces, new energy, different style of politics versus the older generation.
But not everyone is convinced. Some voters say the real test will not be the selection itself, but whether Bensouda can bring the different opposition forces together and convince voters across the country. They argue Bensouda's ability to unite the opposition and win nationally.
All politicians have their own interests and they put their interests first.
He has not done anything significant in politics that the greater Banjul area will know him or even be influenced by his candidacy to become a president in the upcoming election.
Running KMC is very different from running a presidential campaign across the entire country.
For others, the coalition discussion is less about personality and more about a possibility of representing voters with a united alternative to the ruling party. Ibrahim Sajo believes opposition parties must put aside their differences and support a simple candidate.
If the opposition wants to win, they must rally behind their candidate. They must put all their differences aside to make sure that victory is assured on that day of voting.
As the campaign season approaches, Talib Ahmed Bensouda will now have to move beyond securing the coalition's nomination and focus on winning the confidence of the majority of the Gambian population. As a reminder, the main opposition UDP, formerly a member of the Coalition 2026, which withdrew due to selection process of the presidential candidate, has yet to comment on the development. For WADR, Rose Samara Cates, Banjul.
The University of Liberia's plan to resume classes this August faces a major challenge as the faculty maintains that its instructors will not return to the classroom. This development comes less than a day after the university president, Dr. Lali Mapayan, announced plans to resume academic activities following months of disruptions. As the situation unfolds, thousands of students are waiting to know when their studies will resume. WDR Monrovia correspondent Ibrahim Parker reports.
The University of Liberia has been largely affected by weeks of faculty and staff disengagement over unresolved concerns about working conditions, compensation, and other institutional matters. Students are bearing the brunt of the interruption of their academic calendar, but the university's president Mapayan says academic activities will resume this August, pledging the administration's intention to move the institution beyond the current impasse.
School is going to reopen. I'm going to talk with our administrative staff. Let's get everything online, so we're going to have to rush because we've lost a week or two compared to when we had planned to start with registration. But that doesn't mean we can't get things up and running. So it's going to start there. We're going to assess and get it going.
However, the faculty says the announcement does not reflect its position. Secretary General of the University of Liberia Faculty Association Eric Patton maintains that the decision to reopen cannot be implemented while the issues that trickled the faculty's disengagement remain unresolved. The faculty's position now puts the university administration's AUKUS reopening plan under pressure. For students, the latest development comes after weeks of uncertainty over their academic future. A further delay could mean additional adjustments to the university's academic calendar, examinations, and graduation timelines. For NEWSLINK on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
You are listening to NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and around the world at WADR.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Majority bloc in Sierra Leone's parliament approves constitutional amendment despite opposition by minority APC camp. Senegal's anti-graft agency publishes report on compliance rate of asset declaration by senior state officials. Malian prosecutors requested 10 years prison sentence for activist Ras Bath and Rokia Dumbuya as their trial resumes in Bamako. In Ghana, legal practitioners call for a closer examination of AXA power agreement involving former power minister. Still ahead in the news, we have the guest interview and the sports. Please stay with us.
Connecting Ghana to West Africa. This is Nadidi Tete in Accra, and you're listening to WADR 94.9 FM, Dakar.
Thanks for being with us. We are streaming live on YouTube at WADR News and on Facebook, WADR English Service. In Guinea, concern is growing over the arrest of activist Abdurrahman Bellaba. His family says his arrest is linked to a post on his Facebook page in which he criticized a recent statement by the Grand Imam of the Grand Mosque of Conakry. Since his arrest, his family says they have received no further information about his whereabouts or condition. Sankula Janko tells us more.
Abdurrahman Bellaba was arrested last Saturday while at his school. According to information reported by his family, this arrest is linked to a post he shared on his Facebook page criticizing a statement made by the Grand Imam of the Grand Mosque of Conakry. The activist family says they have been trying to find out the exact reasons for his arrest and where he is being held. They are calling on the authorities to officially release information about his situation. Human rights organizations are also following the case with concern. They are demanding that the activist's rights be respected and that his family and lawyers be granted access to him. As of now, Bellaba's whereabouts are not officially known. No authority has yet released any information regarding the charges against him. This latest arrest of the activist reignites the concerns about freedom of expression in Guinea and the treatment of citizens arrested for social media posts.
Sankula Janko with the details of a report filed by Conakry correspondent General Alpha Ibrahim Ambalde. Turning to security, the Nigerian military says sustained counterinsurgency operations in the northeast are dealing major blows to Boko Haram and ASWAP, with several top commanders reportedly eliminated and terrorist command, including propaganda networks, disrupted. But despite these gains, rural communities and farmers remain exposed to serious security threats. WDR's Usma Umar reports.
For over 16 years, the conflict in northeast Nigeria has devastated rural livelihoods and displaced entire agrarian communities. In recent months, military authorities report an intensified campaign targeting insurgent strongholds across Borno State and the Lake Chad Basin. Speaking in Maiduguri, The theater commander of Operation Hadinkai, Major General Abdusalam Abubakar, revealed that strategic strikes have severely weakened the command capabilities of both Boko Haram and ISWAP.
These successes have shifted the momentum decisively in our favor, and we remain committed to sustaining the pressure until terrorism is completely defeated. The neutralization of Abu Salim al-Banawi and other members of the ISWAP media team was a major blow to the terrorist propaganda machinery.
Military statistics show over 350 insurgents neutralized in recent precision strikes, adding to more than 1,000 fighters eliminated earlier this year, alongside the recovery of critical propaganda and communication hardware. Yet, over 700 rural villages across the northeast and northwest remain gripped by fear under constant threat or extortion by armed groups. With thousands of farmers still unable to access their fields and over 2 million people displaced, civil society groups emphasized that tactical military gains must translate into permanent ground security to restore rural livelihoods. For NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, let's take you back to the Gambia, where the United Party leader Talib Ahmed Bensouda has emerged as flag bearer of the opposition coalition 2026. His selection follows months of negotiations, which also saw disagreements and withdrawal of other opposition parties. But question remains over its strength, unity, and the chances of the polls. Gambian political analyst Usman Barrow joins us to assess coalition 2026 prospects ahead of the election.
The opposition coalition is actually fantastic because I would say weeks before on the 8th, people were actually waiting for this particular outcome because we have seen what coup d'etats actually did in Africa. So now we are trying to, be more optimistic and move towards the ballot box. And this is why I think the idea of forming coalitions actually sits well in the minds of the people, because it happened in 2016 and they feel like in 2026 for there to be change, with all the negative factors that already we are experiencing.
What would you consider as the chances for this opposition coalition and its flag bearer now, being Talib Ahmed Bensouda?
I believe at this point they have like a 95% chance to actually win. The reason I say this is because, we have to remember that most of the time it's hard to remove the incumbent because they have almost all the resources, but they have actually the blueprint to actually present to the people that this is what we have done for you guys. So for this being the reason, there's no way you really want to risk it and go in for someone that has not actually come into power, that the person has not been tested to prove that they can actually do well. But the fact that coalition is actually a symbol of sunshine in the minds of the people, owing to the fact that they believe that for an incumbent to be removed, there has to be an amalgamation of parties that actually come together.
What's the relevance of this coalition now that has a standard bearer when two major opposition parties are not members of this coalition?
That's a very beautiful question. First of all, the two major opposition parties that have already removed. Now, the outcome that happened on the 8th has actually sparked something very, very sensitive. So that actually showed that there's a selfish interest looking at the demand of that particular opposition party that actually left the coalition discussion at the last minute. That is so bad. It might actually consider joining another political party because that is the trend. And like I said, already sparked some suspicion with regard to what it has done last minute. So all those things can actually be factors that can, make the people say, okay, you know what, this is not the option. That is cancel number.
How politically influential members of the current opposition coalition are, given their previous records in terms of amassing votes to ensuring that they can make a change come December 2026 election?
When you look at the coalition itself, those who have the remaining parties that actually decided to go on with the formation of the coalition with the leadership of Unite, actually these parties are backing on the fact that their flag bearers have experience from work abroad or work in high places, and also the knowledge that they have. That is that debate, some of them. Now, when you look in terms of numbers, who can pull numbers? Obviously, it's the two political parties that actually walked out or walked away from the coalition formation. Obviously, that because they have been tested in 2021. We saw Sobea and we saw GDC date in 2016. So, no doubt, they are the most relevant opposition parties as far as the coalition formation is concerned. But the coalition is an optimistic move for the people because this is what public opinion has, that the coalition is the only thing that can remove the incumbent.
You just listened to Gambian political analyst Usman Barrow. Now in sports, the semi-finals of the Women's Africa Cup of Nations WAFCON 2026 will see Algeria face Malawi and Morocco face Cameroon on Wednesday in Rabat, following the 4 quarterfinals played on Saturday and Sunday in Morocco. The Algerians reached the semi-finals after eliminating Cote d'Ivoire 2-1, while Malawi caused an upset by defeating Ghana 2-1. In the other semi-finals, Morocco faced Cameroon also on Wednesday in Rabat. Morocco qualified at the expense of South Africa 2-1, while Cameroon eliminated defending champions Nigeria with a score of 1-0. The 4 semi-finalists have already secured their qualification for the 2027 Women's World Cup, scheduled to take place in Brazil. The table was completed after 4 quarters. And FIFA President Gianni Infantino came under renewed fire on Monday as a joint letter from 3 confederations belongs to no one, as they said. Infantino has been the fulcrum of scathing criticism ever since launching and then withdrawing within days a plan to bring private investment into FIFA competitions, including World Cups. However, Monday's letter from the governing bodies of European football, UEFA, North and Central America, CONCACAF, and Asia, AFC, showed his critics are unbound. The 3 confederations had been vociferous in their condemnation of Infantino's plan and had not let up after it was shelved. CONCACAF President Victor Mutaglani is viewed as a potential challenger to Infantino, who will seek a 4th and final term at the FIFA presidential election in Rabat next March. Candidates have to be declared by November 18. That's the latest in the world of sports. We've come to the end of this edition of NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Mauruju for the technical assistance. To interact with us via our social media platforms, including X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. I am Augustine Cully. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to NewsLink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in